I've spent 52 years learning that the hardest thing to look at isn't a total stranger. It's someone who's spent years trying to become you. My name is Jimmy. For 5 years, I thought I was living a quiet, blessed life with my wife, Jolene. I thought I knew every curve of her smile and every note in her voice. I thought those twice-weekly trips she took to visit her sick mother were a testament to her beautiful heart. But on a cold Tuesday in December, a single phone call from the bank turned my entire reality into a house of cards. Before I tell you how I walked into my own home and found a ghost living in my closet, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt a cold shiver down your spine, a gut feeling that something was wrong, only to tell yourself you were being paranoid? Drop a comment and tell me the city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. And if you believe that the people closest to us are the ones most capable of destroying us, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear what happened when I saw the man who was using my face to steal my life. I was at my office, buried in quarterly reports, when my phone buzzed with a call from First National Bank. The woman on the other end, Margaret, sounded professional, but I could hear the tremor of hesitation in her voice. She asked if I was currently at the downtown branch. When I told her I was at my desk, the silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. "Sir," she said, "I don't think that's you here at the bank. Your wife is here right now with a man who looks exactly like you, and they're trying to empty your joint savings account." The air left my lungs. I told her that was impossible. Jolene was across town at her mother's. But Margaret didn't back down. She told me to get there immediately. The 12-minute drive felt like 12 years. I kept trying to find a rational explanation. Maybe Jolene was with a bank employee. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the dread in my chest was growing like a shadow. When I walked into that bank, the familiar smell of carpet cleaner and stale air felt like a trap. Margaret led me to her desk, her eyes full of a pity that made me feel sick. She showed me a folder thick with 18 months of strange activity. There were withdrawal attempts and transfer requests, always timed perfectly for when I was out of town for work. Then she showed me the ID the man had used that morning. It was a driver's license with my name, my address, and a face that was almost mine, but not quite. The nose was a little sharper, the jaw a bit wider. Margaret whispered that he looked like my twin. I don't have a twin. They had tried to take $45,000, every cent of the savings I'd earned working weekend shifts and overtime. Margaret had stopped the transaction because Jolene couldn't answer basic security questions, things a wife should know but mine apparently never bothered to learn. Margaret leaned in and told me, "This isn't just fraud, Mr. Hartwell. This is personal. Someone has been learning your routines, your schedule, your life." I walked out of that bank in a daze. I drove home, my mind replaying every mother's visit Jolene had ever made. When I pulled into the driveway, her car wasn't there. I walked into our house, and for the first time it didn't feel like a home, it felt like a stage set. I went into our bedroom and opened my closet. Hidden behind my winter coats was a gray sweater I'd never seen before, and a pair of jeans that weren't mine but were exactly my size. Someone had been dressing like me, rehearsing to be me, while I was sitting right there in the next room. I'm Jimmy, and I realized that afternoon that I wasn't just losing my money, I was being replaced. But what I found hidden in the floorboards under those clothes, well, that's when I realized that Jolene's sick mother wasn't the only ghost in this story. I've spent 52 years on this earth, but I never realized that a human being could be as cold as a winter stone while wearing a warm, blonde smile. I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 3 hours, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since turned into a puddle of black ink. Across from me lay the evidence, that gray sweater and those jeans I'd found in my closet. They looked like my clothes. They were my style, but they weren't mine. They were a costume. I watched the clock on the wall tick away the minutes until 6:37 p.m. That was her time. Like a Swiss watch, Jolene always returned from her mother's house at exactly 6:37. Before I tell you about the moment I saw the mask slip off my wife's face, I want to ask, have you ever looked at someone you've slept next to for years and realized you were staring at a total stranger? Drop a comment with the name of the city you're watching from. I'm Jimmy, and your support is what's keeping me standing. And if you think blood isn't always thicker than water, especially when that blood is stealing your life, hit that subscribe button. You need to hear the logic she used to justify robbing me blind. The front door opened, keys jingled, heels clicked. "Edwin, honey, I'm home. How was your day?" Her voice was like honey, the same cheerful tone that used to make my heart light. But as she stood in the kitchen doorway, I saw it, a tiny, microscopic tightness around her eyes. I asked her about her mother. I asked her about the doctor. I poked and prodded until she mentioned insurance, and that's when I dropped the hammer. I told her I'd called the insurance company. I told her they hadn't seen a payment in 8 months. I watched the water bottle in her hand tremble. Then it hit the floor with a hollow thud. The silence that followed was heavy, like the air before a tornado. I told her about the bank. I told her about the man who looked just like me trying to take our $45,000. Her face went as pale as a ghost, and she sank into the chair right on top of that gray sweater. "I can explain," she whispered, but the explanation was a nightmare. She told me she had a twin brother named Marcus, a man she told me years ago didn't exist. She claimed he was in financial trouble, and that the $3,000 a month I thought was for her mother's medicine was actually a fresh start for a professional con artist. My wife, the woman I trusted with my soul, had been feeding her brother my life savings for 2 years. Over $100,000 gone. But it gets worse. She admitted she gave him my schedule. She gave him my mannerisms. She told him what I liked to wear and how I spoke. He'd even had minor cosmetic surgery to look more like me. She sat there crying, telling me it was a family obligation. She actually had the nerve to say she was protecting me by making sure he only stole small amounts at first so I wouldn't notice. She thought she was being a good wife by managing the pace of the robbery. I looked out the window at the garden we'd planted together. Every flower, every piece of patio furniture felt like a lie. I realized that Marcus didn't just look like me. He was inhabiting my life, and Jeline was the one holding the door open for him. When I asked where he was, she said she didn't know. When I asked if her mother was in on it, she whispered that her mother had always protected Marcus. I told her to pack a bag. I told her she had to leave. She started sobbing, begging me to understand the bond of a twin. But as I watched her walk up the stairs to get her things, I didn't feel like a husband anymore. I felt like a crime scene investigator. I realized that if Marcus was still out there and he looked exactly like me, my nightmare wasn't over. It was just getting started. I stared at her as she gathered her things, her movements mechanical, her eyes refusing to meet mine. "Can I come back tomorrow?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Can we talk about this more when you've had time to process?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. This woman, the one I'd planned to grow old with, was a stranger wearing my wife's face. As she walked out the door, a terrifying thought took root in my mind. Jeline was the architect, but Marcus was the weapon. And Marcus wasn't done with me. That night, sleep was an impossibility. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like an intruder. Every shadow on the wall looked like a man who shared my jawline and my name. At 3 a.m., fueled by caffeine and a desperate need for the truth, I went to our home office. I found the filing cabinet locked, something Jeline had always laughed off as protection against burglars. I found the key hidden in her jewelry box, tucked behind the very earrings I'd bought her for our anniversary. My hands shook as I turned the lock, and what I found inside didn't just break my heart. It turned my entire life into a crime scene. Before I tell you about the $190,000 document that proved I no longer own my own home, I have to ask, have you ever realized that your organized partner was actually just a very efficient criminal? Drop a comment and tell me your thoughts. I'm Jimmy, and I'm reading every single one. And if you think a stolen signature is the ultimate betrayal, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear the timeline of my own replacement. The first folder was full of medical bills for her mother. I pulled up the clinic's website on my phone and compared the letterheads. They were forgeries, sequential, neat, and fake. But the second folder made the air leave the room. It was labeled property management. Inside was a deed transfer from 6 months ago. My house, the one I'd bought years before I even met Jeline, had been transferred into her name only. Below that was a mortgage refinancing agreement for $190,000. It bore my signature, a signature I had never penned. The third folder was the final nail in the coffin. It contained the life of Marcus Reeves. Driver's license, social security card, birth certificate. But tucked inside was a handwritten note from Jeline. It was a practice schedule. It listed my every move. When I left for work, when I went to the gym, my business trips, even my favorite coffee shop. On the back of the page, someone had practiced my signature hundreds of times, over and over, until it was indistinguishable from my own. And then I saw the timeline. Jeline had mapped out my replacement like a corporate merger. Month 1 to 3, information gathering phase, established trust. Month 4 to 8, documentation collection. She hadn't just been helping her brother, she had been training him to step into my skin. I sat there in the dark, realization hitting me like a physical blow. I wasn't just being robbed, I was being erased. I realized that if Marcus had my signature, my schedule, and my house, he didn't need me alive anymore to finish the job. I'm Jimmy, and the next morning I didn't go to work. I went to the one place Jeline told me I was never allowed to go, her mother's house. And what I found waiting for me in the driveway. Let's just say Marcus wasn't the only one who had been practicing a part. I was staring at a 2-year countdown to my own funeral. Month 25 plus. The paper read, complete asset transfer and relocation. But it was the ink at the bottom that made the room spin, darker, heavier, and colder than Jeline's handwriting. It said, if Edwin becomes suspicious, implement contingency plan. Make it look like an accident. I'm Jimmy, and in that moment the man I used to be, the guy who believed in until death do us part, died right there on that office floor. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a target, and according to that timeline, I was already living on borrowed time. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the phone. I called Margaret at the bank first, leaving a frantic voicemail, and then I did what I should have done the second I saw that gray sweater. I called the police. Before I tell you about the accident they had already staged for me, I have to ask. Have you ever looked at your life and realized you were the only one playing for keeps, while everyone else was just playing a game? Tell me in the comments. I'm Jimmy, and I need to know I'm not the only one who's been this blind. And if you want to see how a quiet accountant turns into the man who hunts down his own ghost, hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to hear what Detective Chen found in my backyard. Detective Sarah Chen didn't look like the cops on TV. She was sharp, quiet, and moved with a clinical precision that actually made me feel safe for the first time in 48 hours. She spread the documents across my kitchen table, the forged deeds, the practice signatures, the murder plot. Mr. Hartwell, she said, her voice dropping an octave, you are lucky to be breathing. Based on this timeline, you were days away from the final phase. In their world, that usually means you disappear, and a guy who looks like you moves your money across state lines. She told me this was bigger than a local precinct. We were talking interstate fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. She took photos of every single page and bagged them like they were radioactive. When I told her about Jeline's mother, she didn't even blink. She just asked for the address. I gave it to her, but a sickening realization washed over me. I had never actually been there. In 5 years, I had never once seen the woman I'd been supporting with $3,000 a month. The people who did this to you, Chen said, are professionals. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a harvest. She explained that Marcus and Jeline probably had a trail of accidents behind them, victims who never realized they were being robbed until they were gone. After she left, the silence in the house was deafening. I looked at the walls, the furniture, the photos. It was all hers. The house I'd bought before I even knew her was now legally hers because of a forged piece of paper. I was a squatter in my own life. I sat there until the sun started to crawl over the horizon, realizing that every kiss, every "I love you," and every morning coffee had been a calculated move to keep the mark, me calm until the slaughter. My phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Margaret from the bank, her voice thick with worry. "Mr. Hartwell, I got your message. Are you all right?" I looked out the window and saw a dark sedan I didn't recognize idling at the end of the street. "I'm alive, Margaret," I whispered. "But I think the contingency plan just pulled up into my driveway." I sat in that anonymous hotel room, the smell of industrial cleaner and stale air pressing in on me, feeling like a man whose shadow had finally come to life and was trying to pull him into the ground. Margaret's voice was still echoing in my head. She'd found 2 other men like me, men who worked hard and loved their wives, who were now lying in graveyards because their accidents had been scheduled on a timeline just like mine. I'm Jimmy, and as I looked at my reflection in the hotel mirror, I didn't see a 52-year-old man anymore. I saw a ghost. Before I tell you about the photographs Detective Chen laid out on that coffee shop table, the ones that proved my wife was a literal shapeshifter, I have to ask, do you truly know the person sleeping next to you? Do you know their past, or only the story they decided to tell you? Tell me in the comments. I'm Jimmy, and I've learned the hard way that a beautiful story is often the best camouflage. And if you think a woman can change her face but never her soul, hit that subscribe button. You need to see the versions of Jeline I was about to discover. Margaret had told me they weren't giving up. Even with the police involved, someone had tried to drain my retirement savings at 3:17 in the morning. They were desperate now. Their 2-year investment was failing, and a cornered predator is the most dangerous kind. I stayed in that hotel for 3 days, my hand never far from the door's deadbolt, watching the parking lot for a man who had my jawline and a car I didn't recognize. When Detective Chen finally called me to that coffee shop, she didn't look like a cop with a lead. She looked like a woman who had seen into the abyss. She spread out photos of 3 different couples. The women in the pictures were all different. One had dark, curly hair, one was a redhead with glasses, and the third was a petite brunette. But then I looked at their eyes. That same calculating, predator's glint I'd seen in my kitchen. "Look at the men," Chen whispered. I studied the husbands. They were different people, but the men standing next to them, the brothers or cousins, all had that same basic bone structure. They were all Marcus. And then she dropped the bomb that turned my world to ash. "The women aren't different people, Jimmy," she said. "They're all her." She explained the reality of the monsters I'd let into my home. Plastic surgery, dental veneers to change her smile, colored contacts, and a revolving door of identities. My Jeline had been married at least 4 times. She and Marcus were a team, a 2-person wrecking crew that spent years building a life with a victim just to harvest it and move on. I wasn't just a husband, I was a project. A crop they had been watering for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to harvest. I looked at the photos again. In every one, the victim was smiling, looking at Jeline with a gaze full of pure, unadulterated trust. They had no idea they were hugging their own executioner. "What happened to the husbands?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Chen leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. 2 car accidents and 1 accidental overdose. You're the first one to walk away, Jimmy, and that makes you the only witness who can put them away for good. Professional. That word hit me harder than a physical blow. Detective Chen didn't use the word marriage or affair. She used terms like target profile, equity extraction, and harvesting. I'm Jimmy, and as I sat there, I realized my entire romantic history was actually a business plan. That bookstore meeting I'd cherished for 5 years. A setup. The way she laughed at my jokes, market research. Before I tell you about the hunting accident they had scheduled for me next month, I want to ask, have you ever felt like a fool for being a good person? Like your ability to love was just a vulnerability someone exploited? Tell me your story in the comments. I'm Jimmy, and I'm finding out that being isolated and trusting is apparently a death sentence in some circles. And if you want to see the moment the bait finally snaps the trap shut, hit that subscribe button. You need to hear what they had planned for my life insurance. Chen laid it out for me. Robert Mansfield, David Park, Michael Torres, 3 men all my age, all successful, all dead. Accidents, suicides, heart attacks. They weren't just stealing money, they were cleaning up the witnesses. And I was next. She showed me a note found in their storage unit. It was a play-by-play for my accidental death during my annual hunting trip. Marcus was going to be the friend who witnessed my rifle misfiring while I cleaned it. He was going to comfort the grieving widow while she collected a double payout on a $250,000 policy. "We want to use you as bait," Chen said. The words made my blood turn to ice. She wanted me to go back to that house, that crime scene, and pretend everything was normal. She wanted me to follow the practice schedule Jeline had written so they would feel safe enough to come in for the kill. I went back. I had to. If I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for a twin to jump out of the shadows. I walked back into my house, and it felt like stepping into a grave. Every piece of furniture was a reminder of a lie, but Detective Chen had moved her team in. Agent Martinez was across the street. Agent Thompson was in a cable van. I was surrounded by ghosts of my own, but I felt more alone than ever. For 5 days, I played the part. I left at 7:45. I went to the gym. I ate at the restaurants Jeline had noted as my favorites. I was a man living a script written by his own murderers. The fear was there, but beneath it, a new fire was starting to burn. It was a cold, hard rage. They didn't just steal my money, they stole 5 years of my soul. They made me love a woman who never existed. On the 6th night, the silence in the house changed. It wasn't the silence of an empty home anymore. It was the silence of a hunter holding his breath. I was sitting in my usual chair, reading a book I couldn't focus on, when I heard the faint click of the back door, a door I knew I had locked. I didn't reach for the panic button yet. I wanted to see him. I wanted to see the man who thought he could be me. The gray sedan didn't move. It sat 3 houses down, a silent, metallic predator with windows so dark they looked like ink. I'm Jimmy, and as I drove past it that morning, I felt the air in my car grow thin. I knew they were in there. I knew they were cataloging the exact moment I turned my blinker on, the way I adjusted my tie, the look of exhaustion I couldn't hide. I called Detective Chen from the road, my voice a jagged whisper. "It's them, Jimmy," she said after running the plates. "Fake registration, stolen tags, they're closing in." Before I tell you about the moment the version of Jeline I loved walked into my office and looked me in the eye, I have to ask, have you ever had to act like you were perfectly fine while knowing your life was hanging by a single, frayed thread? Drop a comment. I'm Jimmy, and your messages are the only thing keeping me grounded in this hall of mirrors. And if you want to see how a loyal husband looks when he finally stops being the victim, hit that subscribe button. You need to hear the lie she tried to sell me in the lobby of my own job. For 2 days, they hunted me in plain sight. The gray sedan followed me to the gym. It sat at the edge of the grocery store parking lot. It was psychological warfare. They wanted me to crack. They wanted me to feel that no matter where I went, Marcus was just a few feet behind me, wearing a face that could be mistaken for mine in a dark alley. I dream about that hunting trip, the cold steel of the rifle, the accident that was actually an execution. But on the 3rd day, the game changed. My secretary, Linda, knocked on my door looking concerned. "Mr. Hartwell, your wife is here. She says it's an emergency." My blood turned to liquid nitrogen. I pressed the panic button on my keychain, the one that alerted the 3 agents hiding in plain sight around the building, and walked into the lobby. There she was. Blonde hair, green eyes, looking like the woman I'd spent 5 years of my life with. But the man who loved her was gone. In his place was a 52-year-old man who finally saw the predator behind the paint. She tried to cry. She tried to tell me that Marcus was dangerous and worked for bad people who wanted to clean up the mess. She was threatening me while pretending to protect me. "Edwin, please," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the exits. "Drop the investigation. Tell the police you were mistaken. If you don't, they'll kill you. I can help you start over somewhere safe." It was a masterful performance. If I hadn't seen the practice schedule in her own handwriting, if I hadn't seen the final phase marked with my death, I might have fallen for it. She wanted me to disappear so she wouldn't have to kill me herself, not out of mercy, but because it was cleaner. "And where would we go, Jolene?" I asked, my voice as flat as a dead man's pulse. "To another bookstore, to another town where you can find another Edwin to harvest." Her face transformed. The tears didn't stop, but the warmth in her eyes vanished, replaced by something cold, ancient, and utterly heartless. She realized the mark had grown teeth. "You're making a mistake, Edwin," she said, her voice dropping into a register I'd never heard. "A fatal one." She turned and walked out of the lobby, but as she reached the glass doors, I saw the gray sedan pull up to the curb. The door opened, and for a split second I saw him. The man who looked like my twin holding a black bag. I stood there in the dark, my fingers white as I gripped a kitchen knife, staring at the screen of my phone. Nothing. No signal, no messages, just a cold, black void. "I'm Jimmy," and in that second I realized that the perfect protection Detective Chen promised was gone. Marcus wasn't just a con artist, he was a technician. He hadn't just intercepted their calls. He had jammed the airwaves around my house. I was 52 years old, standing in the dark of my own home, and the only thing between me and a shallow grave was a 6-inch blade and a desperate hope that the cops weren't as incompetent as they currently seemed. Before I tell you how I looked into the eyes of a man wearing my own face and saw the abyss, I have to ask, what would you do if the people you trusted to save you suddenly vanished? Tell me in the comments. I'm Jimmy, and I'm finding out that at the end of the day, you're the only one who can truly fight for your life. And if you want to see how a quiet man finds his teeth, hit that subscribe button. You need to see how this accident turned into a reckoning. "Check the hallway, Marcus." Jolene's voice drifted in, sounding bored, as if she were deciding where to hang a new picture instead of where to drop my body. Marcus stepped into the light of the kitchen, and for the first time I saw him clearly. It was like looking into a haunted mirror. He had my nose, my jaw, my build, but his smile was a jagged wound. He was holding a silenced pistol, and he moved with a grace that told me he'd done this many times before. "You know, Jimmy," he said, his voice a perfect, terrifying mimic of my own. "I actually liked your life. The gym on Tuesdays, the quiet coffee on Saturdays. I could have done this for 20 years, but you had to go and talk to the bank." He raised the gun, and I realized he wasn't going to wait for the hunting trip. He was going to end it here, but Marcus made one mistake. He thought I was the man Jolene described in her notes, passive, predictable, trusting. He didn't realize that for the last 10 days I hadn't been that man. I'd been a man living in a cage, and the only thing I had left was my rage. I didn't back away. I kicked the kitchen table with everything I had, sending it sliding into his shins. As he stumbled, the silenced thwip of the gun barked, and a tile shattered inches from my head. I lunged. I wasn't a fighter, but I was a man fighting for his soul. We hit the floor, two versions of the same man, clawing at each other in the dark. "Jolene!" he screamed, his voice finally cracking. She appeared in the doorway, but she wasn't the grieving widow anymore. She was holding a heavy glass vase, her face twisted in a mask of pure, ugly hatred. She raised it to crush my skull, but before she could bring it down, the world exploded. The front windows shattered inward in a hail of glass and light. "FBI, get down! Get down!" The air was suddenly filled with the roar of flashbangs and the heavy boots of men who hadn't abandoned me after all. They hadn't been jammed. They'd been waiting for Marcus to draw the weapon. They needed the attempted murder charge to stick, and they used me as the hook to catch the fish. I felt the heavy weight of an agent pulling me off Marcus. I watched as they zip-tied his hands, the same hands that had practiced my signature thousands of times. I saw Jeline pinned to the floor, her blonde hair matted with dust, her green eyes finally filled with the one thing she'd never felt for me: fear. Detective Chen walked in, her face like granite. She looked at me, then at the knife still clutched in my hand. "You did good, Jimmy," she whispered. "We got them, all of them." It's been 3 months since that night. The trial is going to be a long one, but they found the bodies of the other men buried in a vacant lot in another state. They found the offshore accounts. They found everything. I'm Jimmy and I'm 52 years old. I lost my savings, I lost my marriage, and for a while I lost my mind. But as I sit on my porch today, looking at a street that is finally, truly quiet, I realize something. They tried to steal my life, but all they ended up doing was showing me how much it was worth. I'm not a victim profile anymore. I'm a survivor. Thank you for listening to my story. If you ever feel like the people you love are actually shadows, don't wait for a phone call from the bank. Trust your gut. And remember, the truth might hurt, but the lie will kill you. I stood in the center of my living room, the knife in my hand feeling heavy and absurd, facing the two people who had systematically dismantled my life for 5 years. Seeing Marcus in the flesh was like staring into a funhouse mirror. He had my height, my build, and features shifted by a surgeon's blade to mimic my own. But while I felt the tremor of human fear, Marcus radiated a cold, mechanical violence. And Jeline, she looked exactly like the woman I had loved, but her eyes were flat, like green glass over a void. "There he is," she said, her smile never reaching those predatory eyes. "My husband." "Ex-husband," I corrected, my voice coming out with a steadiness that surprised even me. "Technically, yes," she conceded, "since you were so eager for a divorce. But Edwin, we never finished our talk. You've caused us a lot of problems. Do you know how much money we've lost because of your interference?" "About the same amount you stole from me, I'd guess," I replied. Marcus laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "We didn't steal anything. We earned it. Do you have any idea how hard it is to live with someone for 5 years, playing the perfect wife, catering to every boring need?" "It was quite a performance," I said. "Very convincing." She actually preened at the compliment. "Thank you. I've gotten very good at it. Each husband teaches me something new about what men want to hear. You were number 7 and the most challenging. Most men are so desperate for love they'll believe anything, but you were observant. We had to work much harder for your trust." "Why me?" I asked. I had to know. "You were perfect," she tilted her head. "Enough money but not too much. A stable job, no family to ask awkward questions. And you were lonely, Edwin. So lonely you'd fall for the first woman who truly paid you attention." The truth of it stung more than the betrayal. She had scouted my loneliness like a weakness in a security fence. Marcus stepped closer, the gun in his hand looking delicate, almost elegant. "Plus, that life insurance policy, $250,000 double for an accident. That hunting trip would have set us up for life, but you had to start asking questions." "Sorry to inconvenience your murder plans," I snapped. "Murder is an ugly word," Marcus mused. "We prefer accelerated inheritance. Now here's what's going to happen. You're coming with us. We're going to stage a very convincing suicide. Depression over the divorce, financial ruin. It's a story as old as time." I looked at the barrel of the gun and felt a strange, sudden relief. The lies were over, the mask was off. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I genuinely loved you. I believed you were real." Jeline's expression softened just for a heartbeat. "I know you did, and in my own way I cared about you. You were kind, Edwin. If I were a different person, I might have loved you back, but I'm exactly who I need to be." Marcus raised the gun. "Enough talk, let's finish this." Then the world went black. The power cut out, plunging the house into a thick, suffocating darkness. I heard Jeline gasp and Marcus curse. I didn't wait. I dropped to the floor and rolled behind the heavy oak table. Federal agents, drop your weapons. A bullhorn shattered the silence from outside. Suddenly, every window was a blinding eye of white light as spotlights hit the house. The front door didn't just open, it disintegrated. Black-clad figures flooded the room. Marcus fired twice, deafening cracks in the small space, followed by the sharp electrical pop of a taser. Clear left, clear right, suspects down. I stayed flat on the carpet until a hand touched my shoulder. It was Agent Walsh. "I'm okay," I whispered, though my heart was trying to beat its way out of my ribs. The lights flickered back on. Marcus was face down, zip-tied and bleeding from his nose. Jeline was slumped against the wall, her face a mask of pure disbelief. "How?" she hissed, looking at me. "We intercepted the calls. We told them you'd changed your mind." "No," Detective Chen said, stepping through the wreckage of my front door. "We let you think you intercepted them. We wanted you inside, where we could catch you in the act." Marcus thrashed against his restraints, screaming about others who would come for me, but Chen just waved a folder. "We've been busy, Marcus. We've arrested 6 more of your organization in 4 states tonight. You're finished." As they led Jeline out, she stopped. She looked at me one last time, the blonde hair messy, the facade gone. "I meant what I said, Edwin. If things were different, I might have loved you. But you aren't different," I said. "You're exactly who you chose to be." I didn't stay in a hotel that night. I stayed in my house. It was mine again. 6 months later, a letter came from the federal prison where Jeline is serving 25 to life. Marcus got life without parole. They tied him to 2 more murders. I stared at her handwriting on the envelope for a long time before I dropped it, unopened, into the trash. I'd heard enough of her stories. I'm 52 now. I sold that house, too many ghosts in the floorboards, and bought a small place across town. I'm more careful now. I'm more suspicious. But I'm also more grateful for the quiet. I think about Robert, David, and Michael, the men who didn't get a phone call from the bank. I survived because of a persistent bank teller and a group of agents, but mostly because when the shadow of my own life stepped into the light, I didn't run. I fought. My name is Jimmy. My life was a lie for 5 years, but the man I am today, he's the truest thing I've ever known. If you ever feel like the person you love is a stranger, don't ignore that chill in your bones. Trust yourself. It's the only thing they can't steal. Thanks for listening. I'm finally at peace.